Fantastic, good stuff right there. I always love spoken word because it takes you somewhere. It gives you a place of perspective to go to. So we're thankful for that. DJ D, what are your thoughts on, I think, what's going on globally? Because this is a global conversation. It's not just a Kenyan one, but this is something that is still with us. What do you think?
The
Sexual-based violence, rape, harassment, all of it.
It's a sad thing.
Yeah.
It really is a sad thing.
Have you experienced it?
I think everyone has.
Yeah.
That's the sad part. Everyone has.
Everyone
but then
has a
we can't
story.
talk.
Yeah.
We don't talk about it.
Absolutely, it's true. And that's why we are having this discussion today. Hashtag #MeToo trended globally when someone decided, hey, you know what, if you have experienced it, why don't you just, your status update or your tweet, why doesn't it just have the Me Too? And the world was shocked at what happened. They realized that, at least half of this globe has experienced some form of harassment, and it's time that we all talk about it, name names, and shame people. So imagine when Betty Adera decided to go for a visit in a far-flung place that's not much talked about, just to realize that the few women that she thought she was going to see were not just few, but it was a lot of women who each had their own story of sexual-based violence. She's here to share her story and to perhaps give us some navigation tools on how we can start to finally look towards a solution-based future. Everybody, please welcome her. She looks gorgeous this morning. In terms of just the reality of the situation where we are as a country.
Yeah,
to be honest, when Betty was talking about what she experienced, I thought she was talking about 2007. I'll be honest with you. We're having a conversation and she was talking about August 8th and I was talking about 2007. Okay, so of course we all know we went to the polls in August and on the 26th.
Yeah.
Did you expect there to be any form of violence in the country, first of all?
Yes, I did. And again, I did that borrowing from what happened to us as a country in 2007, 2008, when the presidential, results were disputed by the opposition. And we also went through the same in 2013, though the violence was not that much. And so when we came to August 8th, far off in my mind, I was expecting it, though not to the magnitude of 2007, 2008. But I knew for certain, again, following, the rhetoric that was there even before we went to the elections, I just told myself, this is recipe for disaster. Now, after the elections itself and the presidential results were announced, 3 days later, of course, we were seeing in the media, the police running battles, with protesters, Nairobi, the informal urban settlements, in Kisumu, and in a couple of cities that are aligned, in counties aligned to NASA, the opposition. And one woman, young lady, she's about 25 years old, called me and told me, Betty, we have a problem. I know the work you do in terms of advocating for girls and women, we have a problem. And I'm asking, what really is the problem? That so many women in my area, in her area, which is Dandora, had experienced unimaginable, levels of violence just following the presidential election. So I planned with her and went there. But in my mind, Kobe, I was thinking I was going to meet 15, 20 women. The social hall was full with over 60 women.
Wow.
Of all ages. There were the 15-year-olds, but there was also the 70-year-olds in here. And these women were from almost all tribes because, the informal urban settlements, houses everybody. And as we got into the conversations, the hall just kept on filling. I think by the time we were done, I could have estimated about maybe 100, 120 women who just came to hear what we had to say. And the stories were horrendous, Kobe. They were horrendous. One woman who, in my estimation, could have been 65, 67 years old in Dandora, and she was living in a place where her tribe was the minority, all right? So she stuck in the house like for 2-3 days, and then she ran out of food. And this is a woman who's taking care of 2 of her grandchildren, little children. So she had to go out.
So this is a grandmother.
A grandmother, technically. So she had to go out to look for food for her grandchildren. And she didn't have to go far off from where her house was. And she met this huge, group of youths who were carrying stones and sticks and everything. And they were running like from one direction to another. So she still stood there wondering, okay, what should I do? Should I run back to my house? And things unfolded very fast. So she had someone scream at her that, "Where, mama, kimbia, like, you woman, run." So she was running. And I think in that whole confusion, apparently she was running in the opposite direction from her house. And then she met now the police, the security personnel, who were now giving these people a chase. And there was the tear gas, there was noise, there was all that chaos. So in the process of now running to catch up with the other group, of course, at 60-something, she couldn't run, that fast. Yeah. So she tripped over something and fell even, all right? And then what she said amidst tears was that one officer, or someone who was dressed like an officer, came to her, pulled her to the corner of the road and just raped her right there.
Right there.
Right there. And when he was done, another one came and another one came, and she could recall 3. And after the third one, was done, he took like a whip and flogged her, like several times, telling her to, in Kiswahili, like, get up quickly and go. When she got to her house, she looked at her 2 grandchildren and just broke down. That was her story. And when she was saying it, she was telling me that, Madam, of course, a couple of days had passed. And she didn't know what to do with this information. She didn't know what to do with herself. She felt so ashamed, of herself, telling me that, look, at my age, I'm a grandmother. I am not sexually active at all.
Right.
And just look at what had just happened to me. And
my mistake. Her age alone should
exactly.
Elicit some form of respect from anybody.
Exactly.
But in this case, not only does it, she was just looked at as an object.
An object. At that point, she was an object. And I'm just imagining just what can happen in a scenario where you remove law even for 1 minute. You can be amazed at what human beings can do.
Were you shocked at the number of women that you encountered during that visit and their stories, and the fact that a lot of them were feeling like, this is probably the only platform I will ever get to speak about my encounter? Did you feel a lot of that?
I felt a lot of that. Each and every woman's story was horrendous, I'm telling you. Well, even for some who were not raped, they narrated the ordeal of how their husbands were killed right in front of them. That's violence. Some narrated the way their sons, who were in their early 20s, were just pulled from houses and just slaughtered right in front of them. Yeah. One woman explained to me how a group of youths, these were not police officers or uniformed persons, but just youths from another tribe, claiming that these ones were from another tribe. And they walked into, the compound where these people live, and there are many houses, families living, like together in one small geographic place. And they were clear that house number this, house number that has people who belong to tribe X. Yeah. So she came out trying to defend her own children, but her husband ran through the window somehow. But they caught up with him. And in that whole process of running, he was thrown from 4th floor down, right in front of this woman.
His family sees.
Yes, your children are seeing, And one woman also told a story of the way she was beaten up by her husband, who was from another tribe, and she's from another tribe. Beaten up, thrown out with a 1-year-old baby. Why? Because she's celebrating. To her, the results meant the person she was supporting won. So she was celebrating. The husband's person who he was supporting did not make it. So he was upset. Right. So just because of that, probably there could have been other underlying issues. I don't know, but insofar as her story is concerned, the catalyst was a political, situation, and she was thrown out. And this woman, she was beaten up, thrown out. So she's just out there looking for ways of survival, because she has to eat and her child, also has to eat.
I think, Betty, the one thing I can definitely say, a platform such as this one, an open town hall meeting is great. Yeah. It's a start for these women to finally be able to air out some of their views and their pain to go somewhere. But it's certainly not enough. In no way form is it enough. Where, you know, immediately after, and this is the thing that they say, and I know this, but the one thing they tell you is immediately after an attack is the first thing you do, you must report it. You must go to the police right away. If it is a rape, you must ensure that you do not shower, you do not clean yourself, because they need to get some evidence, right? So that they can actually open a case. There's a lot of stuff that happens, and a lot of these women that you meet have sort of lost hope of within the system. They don't feel that the accused will ever, you know, get justice. They don't feel that they'll ever get justice. What can you say about that part of things?
An event around a sexual abuse is not one to be joked with, because as a woman, it strips you of any dignity you ever had. It strips you of you. It leaves you empty. It leaves you blank, leaves you confused, leaves you contemplating very many things, perhaps even leaving you blaming yourself. Right. You know, like, was it my fault?
Suicidal thoughts are not anything foreign
Suicidal thoughts, you know, sort of like coming. Fear, anxiety, you know, all of that goes on in the mind of any woman who has experienced especially sexual violence. And let's speak about rape specifically.
Right.
Now, most of the time, you find that the first reaction to that is what? You coil, you hide. You don't go to church anymore, you don't go to the market anymore, you don't go to school anymore, you don't do nothing. All these things you're doing, you just suddenly, you know, like stop doing them, because you need to process that in your head and accept it. And another issue that they have is, will the world even believe me? If I say I was raped by so-and-so or such and such a person, will the world, you know, like, you know, believe me? And in the event that the perceived, you know, perpetrator is a uniformed individual, where do you go? Because that is the place you should even go in the first place, right? You know, to make a case and to report a case. But if you are clear in your mind that the person who should have protected you is the one who violated you, that in itself brings the whole spirit of hopelessness. It's like, absolutely. All right, I will resign to my fate and, you know, come. This is it. This is it, you know, come with me. But what we try to say, and what every woman or girl needs to know, or every person who knows someone who has undergone, you know, a rape, for instance. Again, each case, you know, is unique to itself.
Yes, it is.
If it has happened in such a way that the survivor's life is in danger, she's bleeding profusely, for instance, the first place to go to is not even the police.
It's not.
Go to hospital, all right? The nearest hospital, there are protocols, the health workers are clear on what to do when a rape survivor, you know, has been brought, regardless of the age. They will move in and deal and manage, you know, the situation. They will harvest whatever evidence they need to harvest. They will write, you know, the health worker will write a report on assessment that will be needed on the other side of prosecution. And once that, the life of this person has been preserved, again, you need to look at, is she going home? What if in that home is where this particular act happened? Right. And the perpetrator is still right there. So home perhaps is not the best place to send such a person at that stage. And we need to figure out where else. You know, is there a relative? Is there a friend? Are there shelter homes within, you know, the vicinity?
Creating a safe environment, a safe space for this person.
For this person.
Okay, all right, Betty. Well, hold that thought, because right now what we're going to do is just take a very quick break, because when we come back, Betty and I will delve more into who this perpetrator is, because this is not an alien who falls from the sky and shows up, you know, to do these horrible acts. And so we have to talk about this. And remember, when we say gender, we're not speaking just about women. This is also happening to young boys. It's happening to men. And this conversation is open to both genders. If you know anybody who is suffering, it is time for you to break the silence right now. Log on to social media platforms to find out that information. Numbers will also be appearing on your screen throughout this show for you to call, for you to anonymously SMS. All right, but when we come back, we're still delving into a solution, and we'll definitely get there within this hour. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. We're clapping for you, Betty. We are back, everybody, speaking, of course, about breaking the silence this morning. A very sensitive, but I feel over-drummed conversation that we, as Kenya, have been having it for a long time. It has now picked up speed, I think, globally, where people are starting to be brave enough to speak up, to name the perpetrator. We'll talk about that in just a second, but it's kind of good to see that there's a global movement when it comes to naming and shaming. We'll talk about the effects of that, but the perpetrator is something that I really want to talk about. The person who does this, the person who violates another human being, violently, sexually, in any manner whatsoever, this person is not well, are they, Betty?
They are not well, actually, and they need to be in correctional, institutions.
Absolutely.
But unfortunately, they live amongst us. See, violence of any nature happens everywhere, in schools, in workplaces, in marketplaces, in churches, in correctional institutions, in homes, everywhere and every day.
Yeah.
That's just how big this issue is. And delving down on the perpetrators, most of the cases that are reported, actually the perpetrator is known to the survivor.
Yes.
Or the victim.
Majority of the time.
Majority of the time. So it's either your teacher, or it's your father, or uncle, or neighbor, or someone you do business with, or someone or
the degree of separation is not very
it's not
long.
very long.
Yeah.
Exactly. Or even your supervisor or boss or employer, at work, or lecturer, these are people often than not known to the person. But for me, what really makes my heart sink is the violence that happens right inside homes.
Yeah.
And that is the one that is most common. A young girl is raped by who? The boyfriend of the mother. Or this person the mother is keeping for economic gains. A young girl is raped by the father. Why? Because he's been having girls, giving birth to girls. So he got some wisdom from, hell. Right. That if he sleeps around with his own blood daughter, then that curse is going to, go away, and he'll start having, sons.
Ridiculous.
Ridiculous. Yeah. So we are also seeing an increasing, number of children born out of incest. But if you look at it, it is a pure and classic case of gender-based violence. So perpetrators are actually people often known to the person, whether it's the man or the woman. Remember, even some women are perpetrators themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So looking at that, and the reason why people become victims, it is purely out of fear. Because this person, and a lot of times, especially for young people, it's recurrent. This is someone who will have gone through this over even a decade. And you ask yourself, why didn't you say? Kwani hukusema? Kwani hukumstaki? And for a lot of people who've never experienced it, it doesn't make sense. Because kama ni wewe, kama ni mimi. That's how we always think. Ingekuwa mimi, nakwambia umse. But the person, the perpetrator who does this is wielding a lot of power. They have power over you. They are smart most of the time, so they're very good at being able to hide this. And they do something in terms of mind control, of making you feel if you say that this is going on, your life will be over. How do you, as a victim, as somebody who's going through this, who has been through this, who is sitting in fear, paralyzed completely, how do you begin to melt that away and call this person out, name them, go to the police, go to a person of authority? How do you start that?
Kobe, that's very difficult for very many women, regardless of their age, regardless of their education level, or even their socioeconomic status. Because most of them feel that when I speak up about my rape ordeal, I'm sort of like, opening up my nakedness, if you like, for shame, for the world to scrutinize. And while I say for each case is also, unique in itself, but most of the most common reason for fear is the repercussion, fear for the repercussion. So if I name my father as my rapist, What does that mean? Will it mean I'll have to move out of that home? Will they beat me up? Will he pay my school fees? What if he's prosecuted and jailed? All right, I have to go through all that, prosecution process, court process. I have to take to the dock. I have to describe it as it happened. The evidence is all on me, to convince a judge or a magistrate that this act actually happened to me.
Because it's my word against
because it's
this
my word
person's
against exactly against this person. And while there are a lot of efforts that have been done in prosecution to try and harness, the evidence the right kind of way, there are also issues around corruption, and the perpetrator can pay their way out. And I've seen, quite a number of such cases. So the person goes scot-free, but the survivor is like destroyed forever. Yeah. So for me, the message is, however bad it is, there's always someone you can talk to. Yeah. There's always someone. It can be a friend. It can be a neighbor. It can be a relative. It can be a co-worker. It can be somebody in your network that you can speak to. Speaking to one trusted person is the greatest step a survivor can make towards his or her own recovery.
I like that.
And that's where we need to start. Okay,
perfect segue right now into a clip that I want to share with you guys into the steps to take, okay? Once you become brave enough, and we pray that each and every single survivor, all right, we shall not call you victim, we shall call you survivor becomes brave enough to speak up. What do you do? All right, we've talked about the bill that was the sexual acts bill that was passed in this country. We've talked about the efforts that have been made within private sector, within nonprofit, and within government as well. But really, it starts with you having the guts, really, having the bravery to speak up so it doesn't happen to somebody else. How do you do that? Take a look at this clip. Fantastic, good clip, right? So those numbers are what we should have. If you ask guys if they have Pizza Inn, Akona off head, KFC off head, these guys, you have all these numbers off head, the Safaricom toll-free helpline, you have it. But these are the numbers that we should have off head. These are the numbers that we should just be able to say outwardly, the numbers that we should be passing around our WhatsApp groups, talking about in our churches. It's so important. Are we talking about this stuff enough, Betty?
We are not. And I think a big reason is because of our cultural, orientation. Yeah. First of all, there are many communities, even here in Kenya, where, say, wife battering is expected. Yeah. So if your husband doesn't beat you, all right, he doesn't love you. And in some cases, in the course of beating you, all right, then, it can go beyond just beating and get down to a case of sexual violation. Now, the toll-free numbers that you've just talked about, I think those are numbers that everyone should cram, even one, in their heads, because one, they're toll-free. You're not going to pay at all. And they are also connected to the security apparatus, because violence is a crime. It needs to be prosecuted at some point. And when you call, the receiver on the other side will try to understand the particular case. And look, they have counseling services for free. They have ambulatory services for free if there's need for someone to be evacuated to a hospital. Right. And they also have links to specific hospitals, that deal specifically with, gender-based type of violence, cases. Yeah. And they also have links to rescue shelters if a person needs to be removed, from the site of violence. Absolutely. To a safer place. It's all a package. So that's a number that I would really encourage everyone to know, even one offhand, because you never know when you might need it, but you also never know when a friend of yours, might need it.
Absolutely. I'll tell you guys a story, a very personal story. I was a reporter once. I worked with Radio Africa Group at the time, and I covered all manner of stories, human interest-based stories. And I remember I got a call about a very young girl who was all of 10 years old, whose father was raping her. And she had told the mom, and this is something that we need to talk about, and she had mentioned it to the mother, and the mother tried everything she possibly could, and nothing happened, and this went on for years. And eventually the mom got the guts enough. I mean, she had nothing, and I think a lot of these women and a lot of these survivors, what ends up happening is they have nothing. Yani una hata pesa ya kukula your next meal, so unaenda wapi? So a lot of these people, they'll just stick where they are because hakuna una namna. So anyway, this lady goes to a shelter, and she goes with this young child, and I had the privilege of meeting them, and I hope that to date that they are doing well because they decided to break away. So then the story became, I went and did the story, and it aired and it trended. It was amazing, and my editor says to me, so you need to do a follow-up now. I said, what kind of follow-up? And he says, oh, you need to find out where this guy is. Who is this guy? And I said, oh, that's crazy. But listen, long story short, I went to the police. At the time, actually, we hadn't devolved yet. So I went to the chief of the area in Dandora. I went to the OCPD's office in Buru. I mean, these guys were amazing. They gave me the resources. They gave me 2 officers. We looked for this guy for over 1 week, and we found him. I mean, literally, in the chase. This story is on YouTube. I'm even going to share a link with you guys on social media. And we literally found him, like chasing him down, and we found him. And the neighbors, can you imagine, the neighbors, they actually knew where he was. The whole week, every morning, waking up at 5 in the morning, going to that place, waiting. You guys said to go for lunch. While we were at lunch, someone called and said, ndio huyu amekuja. After a whole week of people hiding him in that same hood, we found him. We took him to court. Do you know he's in jail today? I mean, it's been over 7 years, but he's still in jail. He was sentenced to, I think, over 20 years by the judge. And of course, the story, because it was highlighted, because it was on the news, it got a lot of attention. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's not all desperate. It's not all bad. There are systems in place, and there are people who are there to help you. There are police officers, there are government workers, there are health workers, there are nurses, there are drivers, APs who are literally going to help you. All you have to do is be willing to go for the long haul. And it is so important to know that actually that there are judges across this country as well who will sentence these people for the sentences that they deserve.
Exactly.
What do you think about that part, Betty, of that process? It should be shorter. It's quite long in terms of getting that person up to sentencing point. But how long should the sentences be in your own opinion?
If I were a judge,
I wish.
I would never let such a person, go away. I would jail them for life. I would keep them in confinement for as long as they shall be alive, because an act of rape, technically, spiritually, socially, economically, everything kills the survivor. All right? And in some cases, women actually lose their lives. Women die, girls die, children die. So people lose their lives. So you're talking about murder, but you're also talking about murder that is marred with, a sexual violence. The rules are clear, Kobe, in as far as I'm concerned, and the process is very clear. But one thing that we also need to appreciate is every time I go to communities, especially in the informal urban settlements of Nairobi, they tell me, oh, we are tired of chasing them because we get hold of the rapists, we take them to the police, and then 2 days later, they're out. But what we fail to realize is that policeman or woman also operates within the confines of the law. If no one goes there to write a statement that I am the complainant, what do you want the policeman or woman to do with this person who was brought? Right? Someone has to come out and say, hey, I'm the survivor. I'm the one who was done for. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is my story, and here is the evidence. The other part would also be the part of witnesses. That's where it gets really murky, especially in the slums. So no one wants to come out and corroborate, your story.
Right. And normally there is someone who can.
There is someone who can. If this was an act that happened inside the house, your mother was there. An elder brother, sister, someone, neighbor, someone, was there who has known your story for the longest time ever. But perhaps they fear, they get threatened, they just don't want to be part of that. So they let you to fry on your own. And remember, what does any prosecution want to do? What would a judge want? A judge just wants to see the evidence that clearly connects this suspect to the crime scene. If you cannot answer that question, even if it's known that it was you, what do you want the judge to do?
Right.
You know, court process is about evidence and it's about facts. That is why we also need to step up our game in terms of educating communities on what to do step by step in the event especially of a rape.
Right.
Like preserve the evidence, don't bathe. Move to hospital or police station as fast as you can. The minute you show up, the onus is on that officer to handle you because you have gone there seeking a service. And often they do.
Often they do.
Often
absolutely,
they do.
absolutely. Yeah. I think we've talked about rape and we've talked about gender-based violence. And I think at this point, a lot of people will think, oh, that guy who groped me in the matatu, that's not gender-based violence. So, and it's a very thin line between being able to say, umseali ni grab kwa club, you know, that it still falls under gender-based violence, okay? That person who you sit next to in the office who harasses you and who says funny things to you, that's harassment, okay? And it's important that you realize what it is so that you can name it. I think a lot of us think they're just joking. No, it is time for you to go to HR. Okay, it happens to you in a matatu, speak up, just like Anita Nderu did.
Exactly.
Yes, and we just love her for being so, so brave. So the Me Too hashtag has been trending globally because, of course, of the Harvey Weinstein story, where women across the globe decided to make Me Too trend, telling your own version of sexual harassment. Not only did Anita Nderu come up, but also Lupita Nyong'o, as you know, the Oscar award winner, who is Kenyan, and we just love her, also had her own version of the Harvey Weinstein scandal, where many, many women have come out, and now they're falling like dominoes. These Hollywood executives and actors are falling like dominoes. Even in the Capitol in Washington, D.C., in politics, men are being named for doing so much for so many years and nobody said anything. It can happen here too, and we thank Anita for telling her story. If you missed all of it, here's a little snippet to just give you an idea of what's been going on so you can join the conversation. We'll be right back after the break. In the third part, we interact with our audience and we ask where the solution is with Betty Adera. We'll be right back after this. Thanks. Fantastic. We are back this morning talking about breaking the silence, a very crucial conversation in the day and age where people are naming and shaming. You've seen it happen, not just in Hollywood, here in Kenya, in India, in South Africa. People are coming out. People are speaking about it. It doesn't mean it's the end, though, does it? No. It's something that I think we're going to deal with for many years to come.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something we have to continuously, talk about.
Yeah.
Because the reason why it's difficult to deal with it is because it's difficult to report.
Right.
People are not coming up to speak up about it.
Are we headed towards a solution, Betty, anytime soon?
I think we are headed towards a solution, but the anytime soon, I think that's relative. Because, again, it depends on how we strengthen systems that should aim at, first of all, preventing it from happening in the first place, and also have very, very robust response mechanisms to handle and manage the survivors, and then also to figure out who else to incorporate.
It's no wonder. We've seen issues with the highest of the highest in office. Let's not forget the words that were used by running candidate, the now president of the United States, Donald Trump, where he was found talking very badly on tape. You guys know that story, right? We have public figures across the board, locally, globally, who have been caught, and then nothing happens, right? Yeah, and I think that then becomes the story. I mean, now you have someone as huge as Harvey Weinstein, Kevin Spacey, you have these big names, and everyone is still waiting to see. These people have actually been accused of rape, but even Bill Cosby. But people are now waiting to see, will the police act? I think the first thing that we must do, we must create pressure. As the citizens of this country, as the women, as the women's groups, as the young people, we must create pressure. And when you create pressure, it'll go as high up as to the land, the executive, the Supreme Court. Can you imagine if next year the Supreme Court ruling is not about politics, it's about someone getting a lifetime sentence for rape? So we have questions from our audience.
In cases where evidence has been destroyed, let's say it's been like 2 days or so,
Or even longer.
goes to report.
Yeah.
Can we rely on DNA tests on the offenders, since research ongoing has been showing that most of these offenders, the problem is actually genetic?
Something like a piece of hair, it doesn't really rot, you know?
Yeah.
If it was found and it was preserved the right way, it doesn't rot. And they also have ways actually of preserving even blood samples, all right? Where the catch really is on the part of the survivor. The evidence can be there, all right, but evidence alone, you know, sometimes is not enough for a judge to send someone away. They also need witnesses. They need everything they can get to put this person in the crime scene and then say without a doubt that this is the person who actually committed this particular crime.
All right. Name and shame is the hashtag that we've decided to go with today. Name and shame is the hashtag that we want you guys to come out and start naming some of these perpetrators. If you know somebody who's doing this, listen, they need help, okay? There are centers that are rehabilitating. There is committee, okay, as well, where they need to be behind bars, especially if they've done this to victims. There are so many different avenues rather than being silent. I think that is the last option on the table. Being silent is no longer an option. There are solutions, there are people, there are counselors, medical workers, we've talked about it here, and there are people in this country who are actually putting their lives on the line to help survivors of sexual-based violence. And if you are somebody who's experienced it, we feel for you, but we ask you to be strong enough to speak up so that the pattern does not continue, and name and shame this person, all right? Guys, thank you so much for listening in today and for watching and for joining us and for contributing during this conversation to my beautiful audience. Asanteni sana. For now, we leave you with a beautiful song that should help you realize how strong you are.